Okay, wonderful. Now it's running. So, hello and welcome to an interview I will doing with Sundance Robson, and to get to know Sundance and his story, because I was very inspired when I heard him speak for the first time. This was in July, and it was one day after Chester Bennington committed suicide. And what I suggested to Sundance was to have an interview that shares hope and shares new perspectives of what one can do when one has a difficult past or some traumatic experiences, and how to get out of these painful memories and become a better version and have joy back in their life. So,
Mhm.
hi Sundance.
Hi, Sebastian. I was really looking forward to this conversation and this live video when you contacted me about it pre men's immersion that we both attended in September. Um, when you asked me to do this video, I felt really inspired, and I felt that we were moving in the same spirit. So
Hmm,
it's really great.
perfect. So, could you introduce yourself and your background? Like, who are you?
Well, I'm Sundance Robson. I'm a level two Reiki practitioner, and I'm working towards my uh, Reiki master. I also do coaching here in Regina. I also am involved with sound therapy, and I see clients one on one, as well as I also do group offerings. And I've got some offerings coming up here with my friend Kyle Jordan at the end of December, and we're going to be doing a 4-on gong bath and cacao ceremony. And it's really an opportunity for people to be able to come and be a part of a community spirit, as well as take in a hot chocolate drink that really helps activate the divine feminine spirit, but also helps keep you. It's a great tool for journeying when you're doing instrumentation work, or whenever you're doing sound therapy or a public talk. And people really um, come away from those things feeling grounded, and also a very, very clear, light mind, which so much of us are after. Um, a lot of this journey um, started, a long time ago. And, when we're kids, um, life's, every child's life is different. Uh, but there's an automatic innocence that comes with kids. And I know for myself as a child, I had a sense of innocence that existed. And I had it was a really fantastic start to my childhood. Really big tree in my backyard that I could always climb. Um, there was always a lot of other children around that I was able to play with. And I remember this one time when I was walking home, uh, and I could just sense a power that was so much more than myself. And I was between the school and my house. I could see my home. I could see the tree, and it was like a hot summer day. And I just remember looking up into the sky and seeing the sun there, and sort of just feeling everything around me. And I just remember as a child, even in that moment, wondering about all of it. And in the same time, about wondering about all of it making sense. And that was a really brief moment. And it was a moment that would come back to me many, many, many years later. In fact, it was a moment that came back to me just a couple of months ago. And it was a moment that I experienced back when I was 26, back in 2006. And in between those three really I would have to say grounding moments or awakened moments. There was a lot of trauma. Uh, my father was a residential school survivor, and you know that childhood that seemed perfect at times and seemed very communal at times came to an abrupt halt. Um, the pains of what my father went through in residential school and the part of him that wasn't resolved, or the part of him that was caught up in misunderstanding, or the part of him that hadn't received a sense of healing showed up. And it showed up in home life. And a lot of what we experienced as a family was where a lot of the victim sentiment begins to settle in. One day, my mom came home and the door was locked, and my dad wasn't letting her in. And back in those days, um, you weren't going to get the kids back unless you had a court order. I don't know if the rules have changed now, but literally, my mom couldn't do anything. My dad had us, and unless she had court assistance or unless she had um, a way to get us removed from the home, she wasn't going to do it. And so essentially, my father had us kidnapped. And at that point, um, sizable damage began to set into our lives. And um, all of that was a reaction to my father losing a sense of stability in his life or trying to have a sense of stability in his life. You know, when you're put through the traumas of residential school, and I want to just say this right out the bat. I don't know what it was like to be in residential school. I only know what it's like to live with a survivor that went through residential school. Um, and so I want to talk about this as respectfully as I possibly can. Um, I can only imagine the damage that was set on a lot of those kids because of what happened to them as adults and the way that they behaved as adults without having that sense of reconciliation in their lives. Um, much of the much of the um, way that my father would control a situation was driven through the mind and was driven through a form of sexual abuse. And that wasn't any different than what he experienced. And unfortunately, he never had an opportunity or felt at ease enough to go after healing. And as the result of what he put me through, I came out of that whole living situation with, the yelling, with the violence, the sexual abuse, growing up as a victim. Um, but a lot of the things that happened when I was growing up, I didn't remember. And I remember this one point where, it was a really bad night. And in the middle of the night, one of the things that my father did was he used pornography to brainwash me. And he would set that in motion. Um, the way that he would do it was very dark and it was very disturbing, um, because he would do it in a manner that would create an image of who my mother was and who my and who her interactions were with. And would would use that as a tool to leverage me against her. And this was the result of losing control of the family dynamic, of losing control of his peace and of his mind. And one night when uh, I had actually fallen asleep on this mattress on the floor in the middle of the living room after one of these, you know, I don't want to say sessions, but like, you know, after essentially watching porn as an 8-year-old child, I fell asleep and I woke up to pounding on the front door, and my dad screaming. Uh, he tried to get through to 911. The phone was cut off. And I think even on those old rotary phones, I still think that they let you through or something because I kind of remember him talking to someone on the other line. When my dad woke up and he was screaming like that, I knew that as a kid, I knew that, you know, something was up, something serious was up. And I could hear the guys on the other line, on the other side of the door, saying, "We don't want the kids, Dennis. We only want you." And I remember running down the hallway and running into the bathroom. And I tried getting out the window in the bathroom, but I couldn't. I was too little. I couldn't get out. The bathroom window was raised up above the bathtub quite high, so I couldn't get out. And that's all I could think about doing was to just escape. I was an avid climber. I climbed trees, and I was a little kid. I wasn't scared to try to climb out of the bathroom window and run for my life. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I just sort of sat there in the bathroom, and I could hear the car running outside that those guys showed up. I could hear the exhaust, and I could hear these guys dialoguing between each other. And then they left. They didn't come in. I would imagine they wanted my dad. They wanted to bury him. I don't know what they wanted to do with him, but I don't think they had good intentions for him. I imagine my dad had probably burned somebody. And then shortly after that, the city police showed up at my dad's home and arrested him. And they said that they were there to arrest him because they were concerned of the welfare of the kids in the home. And then at that point, when social services came and got us, we began to go through a series of shelters. The Transition House, which is here in Regina, the Isabel Johnson Shelter, which is here in Regina, the Sophia House, which is here in Regina. And we moved in from that. We went into my grandpa and grandpa's spare bedroom that they had in their home, and we went through school until we could get a rental home that was supplied by government housing here in Regina. And in that process of those shelters and living at my grandma and grandpa's house, I managed to forget about all that stuff. And I
How
think
did
it,
you feel during that time when you're with your father, and also the change then to the shelters?
I think that, well, I had become bitter even as a kid. Um, I was at 11 years old. I was eight when this, not 8 and 9 when this sort of stuff happened. By the time I was 11, I was suicidal as a child, and being, brought in front of child psychologists, and they're trying to diagnose what's going on. And I remember being really upset. In fact, we had actually plans to go to a football game that day, and that was the day that my dad got arrested. We never actually went to the football game. I remember how upset I was feeling about that, and how much I wanted to blame my mom for all that. That this was her fault. And that was just the beginning of this victim sentiment that started settling in, right? And this was all. This is an intergenerational issue. You know, this is just my story. There's thousands of other stories like this from thousands of other kids, that have grown up that have had to grow up with survivors of any type of trauma. It's not just residential schools; it's of any type of trauma. And I think that when you're taken away from the hostage taker, you automatically dive deeper into a victim role. You know, you're sometimes you have a certain sense of freedom with your hostage taker. You know, and when you lose what you perceive to be safe, you get upset and you take it out on the people that are around you. And if the people that are actually there for your best interest don't know what the issue is or how to help you, you're just going to continue to take it out on them and the rest of the world. There isn't anything that anybody can do to relieve you of that victim state mentality. You're just there and you're stuck in it. You continue to move through life in it. So I would have to say that, you know, as a kid, when I was taken back from my dad, I fell deeper into victim, but I was also still just a kid, and I still had found joy, but just a really rank, explosive temper, you know.
Could you talk in that time with someone, or was it that you were kind of like alone with your feelings, with your bitterness, with these heavy emotions?
I don't think that I had, there were moments where I remember, and the timeline is a little foggy for me, but I remember my mom taking me to see a guy that was doing healing. He was doing regressions, and they tried regressing me through some traumas to see what happened. Why is this kid like this? And that didn't work. Uh, they would sit me in front of psychologists or counselors to see what was the problem, but I would just rise up in this explosiveness, right? And it was only because I didn't know. My mind had erased everything that had happened. I had totally forgotten about. I experienced trauma that my mind had erased, and I didn't come to understand how to even talk about it until many, 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 many years later when I hit an absolute bottom. Right. I just continued to go through life as a victim, and again, like I had some really awesome people around me growing up, you know, and I have some really cool friends, um, and friends that were there for me, you know, and we all sort of knitted together, and we bonded together, and we all moved through life, and some of them are still, side by side with me today, and that's a fantastic feeling. And we've all grown together in different ways, uh, but there wasn't really too much that I ever wanted to talk about because I didn't know how to talk about it, Sebastian. I didn't know how to sit still. I didn't know how to be silent. You know, both you and I have met through Kush, and we've had opportunities to be silent. We've had opportunities to allow what's what needs to come up, what has to be brought up, what needs to be purged. We've had opportunities to have that happen because we were given the space to have it happen. And that wasn't really ever anything that I was ever given. I wasn't given the space to, well, let's sit down and heal now. I never knew what was going on.
So you said that you had the space in the last few years to open up and to that what wanted to go out or get out went out, and that you also found more joy. What was the changing point or the changing period in your life where you kind of let go of the past, where you made peace with whatever happened, with the traumatic things that you described?
The beginning stages, and this has been a process like anything else, you know. The beginning stages of this was when I hit a bottom from my drug use, and I ended up checking myself into a treatment center, and I didn't really, I didn't anticipate that I would experience the type of healing that I experienced at a place called Pine Lodge, um, here in Saskatchewan. Uh, I was given a space to uncover some stuff, and one of the things that came up was we had to write down in an exercise all of the things that we were powerless over. So as I was writing down all of the things that I was powerless over, one of the things that I wrote down was like I felt like I was powerless over this. I felt like I was possessed, and that brought me to a place of almost like a darkness. I felt like I was almost like a demonically possessed person. And then I just sort of sat there with that. And then I saw this image of this dark living room and this mattress and this television set and this kid. And that just came up out of darkness. It was just like I was staring off into space. I was thinking, and for a moment I stopped thinking. And out of the darkness, that rose up, this image of this kid, this mattress, and this television. And I wondered what that was because I felt so attached to it. And then I thought, my God, that's me. And then I wondered for a second if that actually happened. And then I remember being taken through that whole night, and it was like it was all there. Um, I didn't ask to remember it. I wasn't trying to remember it. I was only looking for things that I thought that I was powerless over. And it pointed out that and where a lot of my victim sentiment started. And so I get my books together, and it's the next day, and I'm sitting in small group. There's about six of us in this small group, and it's my turn to talk. And this was one of the things that we talked about. And the counselor just probed me on it. We went deeper into it. And I remember getting out of group, going outside, and you've been to these men's immersions, Sebastian. You know, when we have a really intense session and we come out, the endorphins are really, you know, when we go into a break, the endorphins are really sort of going, and you come out of, you know, come out of the room, and you almost feel like there's a buzz. And I came out of the room after I had released all that stuff. I wrote it down on paper. I told the counselor I had released it, and I was walking out of the room, and I was walking outside. It was the middle of July, and I just felt like there was just this buzz, you know, like I had released all this stuff. And I sat down outside, and I looked, and I saw this yellow flower, and this yellow flower was so bright, and I thought about how it was as bright as the sun. It looked like it contained the sun. It was like I was looking at the sun when I was looking at this flower. And then I remembered that moment that I was a kid walking home. I remembered when it all made sense, just for a moment. I remembered how it was all held together. And I knew a part of me had woken up. And subconsciously, I wasn't aware of this, but subconsciously, once you see that, it was enough for me to continue to just to continue to pursue forward into that light rather than the light that I had been heading down. The other path was darkness and just a different shade. And I knew that there was something real and there was something substantial in that moment. And I went on to leave treatment and I went on to fall back into the shitty life that I had before. Life just beat me up because of the mind. I allowed the mind to control my thoughts. The mind is is crazy sometimes. What comes out of the mind is like it's a machine gun of all of these words, sentences, and phrases. And all of these words, sentences, and phrases, it's up to us whether or not we want to take what's getting shot at us. And if we take what's getting shot at us, it's attached to a thought, which is attached to an emotion, which is attached to an experience, which perhaps is attached to a misunderstanding. And that's how we get caught up in that endless cycle and that endless loop. We entertain these thoughts of the mind that are fictitious and unreal. But we give them substance because we think that there's something there because we had an experience at one point in time that revolved around a misunderstanding. And that was how I found myself twirling about for almost a decade after that. And when I finally was able to shut it down, I still had remnants of the mind. The mind was still very active, but I was able to come to a place of where you know I had used myself into a place of just spiritual destitution post treatment. That looking back at that moment when I could make the connection with seeing the sun in that flower and seeing myself as a kid walking back on that path, that was almost looking back at that had almost turned into a curse, that was how destitute that I was. The pain of using didn't go away when I used anymore. And when I ran out, the pain only increased. And so I knew I could do better. And I just started from that point moving forward and I continued to do better. And at a successfulness workshop in Las Vegas, I met Ankush. And shortly after that, I was introduced to the three principles and the idea of mind, consciousness, and thought. And as I started to dive deeper into understanding that, I could see just how much of my life was a misunderstanding. And I remember coming back home post immersion and I felt so I felt prompted to wake up really early the one morning and because I could just it was like I felt the mind pulling me. And it wasn't like my mind was racing. It was like you have to get up and you have to see the mind. The mind's working right now. And so I got up and it hadn't started snowing yet, or it's winter here, and there's snow on the ground. Um, it's a couple months ago, so we had the remnants of summer, and I just remember looking outside and I saw everything, how to life everything was. Uh, and then I thought, I got to get down to the lake, and I got to see everything at the lake because it's just teeming with life. The mind is alive down there. And I thought about that time that when I slept in at the immersion and we were down we went down to that reservoir or that lake in the middle of Birmingham. And just how the night before I was caught up in the mind. I couldn't take any time for myself. I had to sit up all night and throw out messages to people back home. And I remember what a reward it was when I got back down to that lake and was able to sort of see myself and how I was and how, again, continuing controlled by the mind I was. Um, and so to sort of relive that Birmingham experience, I found myself down at the lake that we have in the center part of our city. Wascana Lake is what it's called. And when I got down there, I just saw it all. I saw what I saw what we had been talking about, and I saw the truth of what I was looking at. I saw the mind. I saw there were birds everywhere. I saw the lake, um, the trees, and then this bird was flying across the sky amidst all these other birds. And that thought about someone saying thoughts are just clouds. They come and then they go. Well, I saw that bird and I made that connection. And I thought, that bird is like a thought. It's here. I really don't have an attachment to it. I'm entertaining it. It's flying away. Now it's gone. And then I thought, why would I ever put so much emphasis on that thought? And then I could just see the sky. And I thought, why would I ever put so much emphasis on that thought when I'm in the sky? And ever since then, I've felt resolved with the mind, you know, and have found myself in a place where my heart can be open, where my heart can be open to other people, um, at a place of where they're looking to take it to the next level in their life. Um, my mission in life isn't to open people's hearts. Um, I feel like by deepening my journey and by opening my more, people find themselves just doing that with themselves. And it's a great thing to be able to contemplate yourself with another person at that level, you know. And so now it's shifted, and I actually had an amazing night last night. I was out with a bunch of guys. We went down and we did a traditional ceremonial indigenous sweat. And we sat in a sweat lodge together. And the elder in the middle of the sweat lodge, this dark room, this dark tent. It was almost like an igloo, but a tent. And there had to have been close to almost 40 of us squished into this little room, this little space. And we're all sitting cross-legged, and this guy's bringing in hot rocks off this fire in a pitchfork, and he's sliding them on this piece of wood down into a fire pit. And he's pouring water on it. And then they drop the flap in the back, and then now it's totally dark. It's heating up in there. And the elder's praying. And there's no doubt in my mind that this guy's praying hard. And then he's talking to his creator. And then I thought about how over 150 years ago, they wanted to take that away from kids. That was what was taken from my father. That what we were doing in that sweat lodge last night, 150 years ago, wasn't acceptable. There's no doubt in my mind that the creator heard what that man was saying, and there's no doubt in my mind that the creator hears what the man standing in the church is saying. They're talking to the same person, but divisions of religion and big institutions have created this dissonance, and as a result, um, we're now looking at moving a nation towards healing and reconciliation to restore what was taken. And I feel really blessed to be able to take part in that. You know, um, that isn't something that's separated from me. That's something that is in me. You know, I firmly believe that I'm a manifestation of the universe. The universe manifests what it wants to help resolve itself. You know, and people all have their place on this earth. Sebastian, you have your place on this earth. You're doing this interview, and you're living your will, and you're living your passion out. And I watched you go through a tremendous experience and a tremendous breakthrough at the men's immersion. I saw you do your interviews prior to the men's immersion, and to be able to witness the type of breakthrough that I've seen you have at the men's immersion makes it all the more worth it for me to be able to continue on this path with like-minded men that are searching for a greater purpose in their life and a greater understanding of themselves, and also to remove the misunderstandings that the story that people, that institutions have told them about themselves, the self-limiting and self-defeating lies that aren't true.
It's very curious to listen to you because I can really sense a calmness and stillness. How do you feel now about your past and about what happened to you?
It's just data. That's all it is, Sebastian. It's just data. It's something that I can refer to and look back at and not feel that emotional attachment to it the way that I used to have. You know what I mean? There isn't that energetic strand attached to it anymore because I know it's so much of it is just misunderstanding. I can look at it and be light, right?
If somebody's listening to you or to us now, what would you recommend them? And when they're feeling that the past still has them and still the energy, the negativity, the heaviness is still with them, and they're feeling like I'm broken or I will never be okay.
You are okay. You're not broken. The past isn't real. It might feel real because that's your living. You're living in it. But if you come right here to right now, to where we are, and just move into the stillness that is us and being here now, and remember to breathe, there isn't anything that needs to be resolved. Everything just is. And that's really where we're at. That old expression, the analogy of when you look at a baby, you're just looking at consciousness is so true. And I've heard lots of guys speak about this. You know, I've heard Michael Neal speak about this. I've heard Ann Cush speak about this. When you look at a baby, it's just a baby. It's just this consciousness that is looking at you from a place of non-judgment, and everybody can surround the baby and interact with the baby, and the baby will just smile and look at you. The baby hasn't heard a story. You know, it can just be there. And when we go through life, we hear that story. You know, I hear Zan Perion talks about this one. He uses this analogy of these kids drawing pictures in school, and you know, the moment happens when teacher says to all the kids, "Okay, everybody draw their picture." and everybody draws their picture out, and everybody thinks that they got the best picture, and then the teacher says, "Okay, now everybody hold their pictures up." And when I hold my picture up, I look at it and say, "Well, what is this? Look at everybody else's picture is way better than mine." And then that's when it starts, right?
So you would say that even though it seems or feels like something is broken, that this innocence of babies is still with us and is always with us.
That's 100% right. I we go through life. I'm gonna use this. I went through life and forgot about that. It's not something that you ponder. Um, any of the work that I've done on myself, any of the putting pen to paper and writing things down, or any of the conversations that I've had with a coach, or in a men's immersion, or at a conference, or in a counseling session, whatever, has always sort of been rooted in removing a misunderstanding. And if I've removed the misunderstanding so I can more clearly see the divinity that is inside of me, that essence, the true happiness, the real being that I am, that tells me something. That tells me that my misunderstandings are covering and clouding my true state. I'm looking through the fog back at myself. And if I want to get in my true self and stare from that light back out, I can pierce that fog. I can pierce those misunderstandings. I can remove that stuff. That's my true state.
Now my mind is very clear and I don't have another question to ask.
That's how it works.
Is there anything, any book or article or video that you can recommend to people who want to take this deeper and want to, just let go of their misunderstandings that you were speaking about?
You know what? I would really refer people to look into three principles and Google anything on the three principles they can. Google Sydney Banks and just try to get a grasp on understanding these three principles. I have a link on my Facebook, Sundance Robson, that links you right into the three principles movies.com. And it's actually the only link that I have on there. It makes it really easy. And the reason for that is I think that they've put work into making this as easy as possible for people to have this understanding. Once you can understand the three principles, it changes absolutely everything. It changes absolutely everything. But if you can't get an understanding of it, nothing's going to change. Nothing will. Um, one of the things about kind of, you know, working on yourself will never end if you are always working on yourself. Gaining understanding changes things a little bit when you are able to see into that enlightened mind, that enlightened state of being. You shift and the world shifts with you.
I think that's a beautiful last word, Sundance. I think we're good.
Hey, Sebastian, I really want to thank you for your time and doing this interview, and I certainly appreciate it. And I hope we can connect in the future more, and I hope that we can. I hope I run into you at another immersion. I'm going to be at the one in September.
Hmm.
I don't know if you're going to be there, but I'll be there, and so a bunch of other guys. And this has just been a really great experience and a great conversation. I know that I touched on a lot of things for the very first time,
Hmm.
and but I just trusted it, you know, and people just need to trust what's pulling them.
I really like it was magical almost how quiet it was when you were speaking and how articulate you are.
We can do lots of things with space. You know, it may just to kind of clue in. I did have a coaching call with Ankush this morning, so that probably helped out a little bit for grounding and training. But this has really been a tremendous experience, and this has not been, you know, so much of this content can be read, um, and so much of this content just has to be experienced. Once it's experienced, then you truly emanate it, right, through experience, through practical application. You know, so that has to do with getting out and living life. You know, you're alive, live, just live.
Okay, let me just